All right, good evening and welcome to the June 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Growth Planning Committee for the town of Kennebunkport.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, recording's in progress. So we'll start off with introduction of members.
Tom Smith.
Rob Wingle.
Jane Evelyn.
Dan Saunders.
Paul Hogan.
Liz Johnson.
Ann Martin.
Nadia Crockett Current, support staff.
All right. We do have no guests tonight, but we're always looking for some feedback. Welcome to come, join us, give you a viewpoint on what we're talking about, or send us a question through our internet page. Always looking for feedback. So first on the agenda is review and approval of minutes from May 20th, 2025.
I move that we approve the minutes. Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you, Liz.
Don't we also have to approve May 6th?
Hmm?
The one before that?
With May 6th?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, you're right, we didn't do that.
We didn't do it last time.
All right, so
I sent both
Right.
last week.
So then,
I'll move that we approve the May 6th minutes as well.
I'll second that.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So thank you again. Thanks for bringing that up, too. We need to finish reviewing the potential language for the agritourism, entertainment, and the land use. So that was sent all around to us, additional amendments. And I'll ask Nadia to bring that up.
Yep.
We can give a final
Working on
review.
it.
Should be nice to figure out a way to have this.
I know. That would be great. To have a screen back there.
I know.
I mean, you guys could come around to the other side of the table, as long as you bring your mics with you.
I hate to put our backs to the audience.
Sure.
It was a joke.
Town should buy us all iPads or something.
Yeah, it's in the
Just need a
budget.
big monitor there, which
Or,
All of your-
monitors or something.
all your lines
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be.
you can do that.
All right, so it's my hope to kind of push through this pretty quickly tonight. We've kind of talked about agritourism ad nauseum. So we're just going to talk about the sections that have comments. So I appreciate Paul and Ann. I got comments from you guys, so thank you for sending those over. A lot of them overlap, so I think we should be able to answer both of your questions pretty easily. Okay, so first comment I have from Paul about the definition for agritourism. My understanding is that, Paul, your concern is that we're not requiring documentation showing that they're registered as a farm? Am I right in understanding that?
Yeah, you caution us all the time about making things difficult for code enforcement. So this is certainly going to make things more difficult for code enforcement to figure out whether they meet the definition. It's very subjective. Are
So-
you gonna go ask for receipts?
Yes. So that basically, if we went with this, since it does have to go to planning board, we would just include it in the things that had to be submitted for a planning board application. So if an application for agritourism comes in front of the planning board, they would need to, like, the burden of proof would be on them to prove that they had met the income requirements for that tax exemption.
So even though they're not registered, even though they haven't gone through the process, that they haven't bothered.
Yeah, I
They
don't
don't
really
know
know I don't really know what that registration process looks like. The state definition just has this income requirement.
Yeah, but
And
you have
then-
to file each year and you have to keep it active and you have to be able to show the state.
Sure, that you filed for the
Right.
tax exemption. Yeah, sure, I think,
That's what I thought we were doing. If other people had a different idea, that's fine too.
So you're wanting some sort of certification that they filed?
I thought they were a
appropriately?
farm.
That they were filed?
They were a Maine farm, which has a certain definition.
So there might be a schedule that they have to include with their return that would state that?
I've never filed, so I don't know what it is, but it
yeah,
is.
I'm not that familiar with the like tax exemption filing process. I know that I don't believe that most of our farms file for that, while they would be able to. I know that that's, I mean, I've heard from the assessor that this is a case for several things, like sometimes, people could file for open space, but they don't choose to, they could file for tree growth, they don't choose to, so I think it's not uncommon that they wouldn't necessarily file for that exemption. I don't know why, maybe it comes with its own stipulations, I'm not sure.
Well, when you then sell it off for a subdivision, the tax is recouped. The real
Sure.
estate tax that you didn't pay is recouped in some way. So the town
Mhm.
is made whole for, the public benefit was there,
Sure, yes,
and then if there's no longer a public benefit, it recoups it somehow.
yes. So I guess we could put that they had to have filed for tax exemption, but I don't perceive this being a difficulty to enforce and verify from a planning board perspective.
So if they could have qualified, they met all of the requirements to qualify, would that be enough? Because they may make a decision that they don't want to take advantage of any discount, and they want to pay
Yeah,
what they'd like to towards the town, it's minimal.
so how do you approve them in year one and then they never do it again under this scenario? If they're not registered with the state and proving to the state every year,
Well, I think that the same thing would happen with
well, we don't,
tax exemption. We wouldn't necessarily track them down every year to make sure they'd filed for their tax exemption.
well, the assessor knows, so you could walk across
I
the next desk and say.
I don't know if we have a town
Yeah, you
farm
do.
exemption.
No, the town knows.
Sure,
Because these people
but-
aren't paying their taxes. So the town has a record of how many properties are in farmland, tree growth, open space. That's,
Sure.
the town assessor knows that. I don't think it's a big burden to ask you guys to walk 4 feet to find that out.
Well,
But
I think,
my point is, doing it that way solved the problem for the town, because they had to do this every year, and they were either exempt or they weren't. Now, if you're saying, okay, we don't want to require them to register, I understand that argument, but then you need an annual follow-up, so that every year that they're eligible, that they're taking advantage of this thing, they're telling the town, yes, I'm still a farm, I'm still,
Still our principal.
and there's nothing in here that, it's a one-time check,
Okay.
period. So, and that's often a problem with planning board approvals and things that,
Mhm.
yes, we approve it, and then there's never a check. I know you guys are working on that.
Would that be a tax assessor office
No, he's,
question?
well, that's if they're registered by the state. That's why I thought it was fairly simple
Mhm.
for the town and for us, so that
Yeah, I think that,
if they stopped being a farm and stopped filing, then they would no longer be eligible for this
We
advantage.
we do have planning board applications sometimes that get approved with a stipulation like this has to be checked yearly. So I don't think that that would be burdensome. I can see where you're coming from. So we can certainly add that in, like to be verified yearly or something like that.
Right.
Do we know if there's a similar requirement for animal husbandry?
Well, if animal husbandry qualifies as a farm, same
Same
deal.
thing, still
You
the
could
same.
grow, or you could,
So the farm is
you can grow
agriculture
anything.
or-
Yes.
Okay.
Why isn't forest management included?
In as one of the,
In agriculture. If you look at the definition of agriculture, it doesn't include forest management, or timber harvesting.
But it wouldn't include tree farms, like a Christmas tree farm?
That's a different
Yeah, it's a different,
animal
yeah,
under the state.
yeah.
That's why I thought piggybacking it to the state, I thought that was our goal.
mhm. Yeah.
So,
So Jane, you're suggesting we should add timber harvesting as one of the,
Well,
Allow-
okay, what about with the Christmas tree?
it's a good question.
Yeah.
Is it?
This is a definition from the state, isn't it?
No,
No?
this is our, definition.
refers, okay.
Yeah, this agritourism is something that we wrote. Mhm.
Okay, so we haven't, so we could add to it then, the forest or Christmas tree farm, if we wouldn't be in conflict with the state.
Yeah, there's a difference between, I think a Christmas tree farm is probably a farm as opposed to managing
Forest
Be-
land?
forest land, because if I understand it, if you're managing tree growth, you don't have to have annual sales, you have to have a tree management plan that you give to the state. And you say, this is under tree management, here's my plan, here's my expert who tells me this is the way to do it. And then you're eligible for the tax exemption.
I would say that
A farm is different.
Yeah, I would say that Christmas tree farming is functionally not that different than like pepper farming. Someone comes, they get something, they buy it, they take it away.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously the use of the tree is different, but I would say that they kind of would both fall under agriculture. So I don't know if including tree growth or including timber harvesting is really what we're shooting for.
Right,
with
I just
this.
noticed if you click on agriculture, it talks about agriculture does not include forest management and timber harvesting activities.
So we say that in there?
That's what is, yeah, in here, if you click on the word agriculture there.
Which is defined in our code.
Yeah. Okay, so that's,
It did-
does it say anything about tree farms? Christmas tree
That's
farms?
separate.
That's separate.
But if, there used to be I don't know if there's anybody in town who manages,
Probably. Yeah, there's one on Dyke Road, New Bedford Road.
We have properties in tree growth, and so presumably there are people that are doing some kind of forest management. I don't don't think that there's any large scale lumbering
but
operations,
if they
but
wanted to do something on the same order, you know.
I think it's different than the farm piece. That's more about just, like you said, it's management of your forest that's around your home or your property.
Mhm.
And you do it for the tax exemption, and that's really the purpose, right? Unless you're really into selling the wood and making some money on that, but, versus we're trying to do something for agricultural.
But I wonder,
And
so
hopefully at some point
is
we can
this,
get to the point where we have a farm stand and it's stuff that we produced here in the town of Kennebunkport that we're buying.
Right, yeah.
That's the goal, or other food or meats or whatever it might be.
for some reason, it was specifically excluded in our
And I think that's okay. And I think the tree farm, maybe someone can make a case that they're a farm and then we let it kind of go there instead of calling it out. But I do like the idea of having some type of repeat verification. So that we don't get the one-off, okay, yeah, I sold my tomatoes and we're good, and I don't have to worry about that again for the next 10 years.
Mhm. Sure. I put in to be verified yearly.
Yeah.
We can certainly work out a good way to enshrine that.
Okay.
All right, and then another comment from Paul about event staff, and I saw a similar comment from Ann about the event staff. When I wrote that last sentence, event staff shall not be counted as attendees, it was with my first draft of the ordinance. There were multiple sections where I distinguished attendees and event staff. So I don't think that sentence is serving any purpose anymore. I don't think it's a problem either. It is a vestigial organ, as it were. So
Well, I think-
happy to remove it.
Okay. I think we still have
So-
parking, but we probably can,
Yeah, we can deal with that.
we do.
So my question is, attendee and event staff, are they separate, independent definitions, or do they relate to agriculture immersion? Without A's and B's and ones and twos, it's difficult to. So it's,
Are you referring to the last section again, where we talk about education, or?
Well, yeah, are attendee and staff, event staff under agricultural education / immersion? Or are they
Oh,
for
I see.
any social gathering at all?
I think that these would be these definitions would be added into the terminology section of the land use ordinance. They wouldn't be, I don't believe they would be like encased within the agritourism section
Okay.
of the land use ordinance.
So
So you would
to
see these,
simplify, in the education world later on, you use participant. So I just
Okay.
think we ought to simplify,
sure,
a person's a person. Do we even need a definition for attendee or event staff?
Well, you have, I'm sorry.
I think it's helpful to have that so that we can specifically, so that we don't run into any hiccups where, maybe in the future we have someone say, well, there were 50 people attending, but we had 3 people staffing the event. So I think it's helpful to be clear that this number includes attendees and event
Yeah,
staff.
but I think you can do that without these conflicting definitions, because we just keep we trip up on ourselves because we've made this a definition, and then we have 2 different groups, and there are different rules for each, but we could say that no more than 200 persons, comma, including, event staff,
I
whatever
think-
your limit is. And it would be the same for both. We
Mhm.
wouldn't differentiate, whatever the limit is for an agriculture event.
Are
And
you, are you looking at Article 7? Is that
Um,
where you are? If I'm looking at Article 7.
I'm looking
performance
definition
standards.
section.
Okay, I looked over at the Article 7 performance standards. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was wanting to track where you were. I'm looking at Article 7 where it talks about social gathering, event attendees and staff total. So I was trying to match what you're saying with that paragraph as well.
Oh, right, yeah. So that has both.
Yeah, I just think we've made this whole thing much more complicated by having these definitions. Like, why do you use attendees, and then you use participants, and then they get mixed up when you are doing the counting for plumbing and for,
I think I would just change that to attendees. Again, it probably just
okay. But why not
a
just?
word choice error.
Yeah, no, I understand. No,
Mhm.
and then we changed it, and then it's coming back and trying to make sense of it.
So would that mean attendees or attendees and then parens events to include event staff as it's sort of stated under social gathering events, attendees and parking? I'm trying to.
We talk about plumbing and we talk about parking as, and we talk about how many people can be there. So I'm just trying to make this simple and not conflicting and confusing. And I think that's our role
Sure.
Right,
before we
right.
say we're done with this.
Mhm.
So I guess I think, my suggestion is you just get rid of attendees and service staff as definitions, and then like, for example, where you say I'm looking at Article 6, off-street parking, 1 space for every 2 event attendees. So you could just say 1 space for every 2 persons.
Sure.
We trip up, we don't talk about the plumbing and the numbers in the agricultural.
I replied to your comments on this. I'm happy to add that in as well, where we can make it a general performance standard. I think since we've limited the number of attendees to 50 for educational experiences, I don't feel as concerned about there being a lack of adequate sanitary facilities because it's kind of at the bottom of the threshold for 1 single toilet, and so I don't see that being a big problem, but I'm happy to add it in as just a general requirement.
So, Paul, you're suggesting that we use just the term persons for everybody who's there, whether they're event staff or attendees? Is that what you're suggesting?
I thought it would make it less confusing.
Yeah, because then under event staff, you don't have to have that definition under event staff then either. You don't need to separate out the definitions of
Right, like,
There is an advantage to it being separate with the parking, because it's unlikely that you're event staff are gonna,
I-
there'll be two people in a car. I mean, they're each gonna drive in with their own vehicle.
Yeah, so I think that creates more of a problem.
Well, they're gonna need additional parking.
Right.
And that can be separate from the attendee part.
We're not gonna have separate parking requirements for, one for, I mean, that would be crazy to try to enforce. I don't know whether I need 12 wait
Well,
staff or 16 wait staff or 4
Yeah.
wait staff. How am I gonna,
Well,
Tell
we're
the
gonna know
planning
is either
board.
They're on the road or they're not on the road. That'll be how things will be enforced, to be honest, right?
right,
So,
but to me, that just adds another layer of complexity, which is unnecessary. If you just said 1 for every 2 persons, then that would solve it, even though service staff is probably gonna drive them by themselves
So
and not be accompanied by their husband or their kids.
how would you feel if we had one word that we were applying to this, and it could be attendee? Just one universal term, attendee. And it makes, they're in attendance, either serving or not serving.
Yeah,
With-
attendee could be, encompass all of them, or person could encompass all of them.
Or person, or participant, well, the participant
No.
designates a role. So,
I think so does attendee.
Yeah, attendee is
It's
not the
gotta
right
just
word.
be person.
so that would translate through a lot of different places there we've used the word attendee. So we'd have to make sure that whatever we chose fit in all of those other locations, which is fine, very easy to do. So you're thinking now persons, I mean, you've got also the persons on site at the event. That's under event staff with that. Would
And I
that
think
be-
you would just eliminate event staff.
I think we just keep them both. Who cares? Like, if you look
Well,
at
then we need to correct it everywhere in the.
See,
And I can certainly do that. I mean,
event
those are-
requirements and limitations, number 1, you can't say,
Where are
you
you
can't
looking?
take out, letter C, event requirements and limitations. Number 1, you can't take out attendees and event staff and say people, because it would be, people on site includes people.
But you wouldn't have that definition in there at all, if I'm looking. Where are you looking?
Just take it out altogether.
Mhm.
Well, you just say social gathering, is that where you're looking, B1?
C1.
C1, sorry.
So I think the idea is everywhere that there was something like that where we specify attendees and event staff, we would just take out the specification because it would be unnecessary at that point.
I think I disagree with that. If you just say people, people who are running this may infer that means guests, attendees, participants, and not staff. So I think saying, it sounds redundant, but I think it's more clear to say, attendees plus staff. There's no confusion as to what it includes.
Yeah, and I think you could say that like in B, social gathering, is this where the first time it's shall not exceed 200 people. You could say including attendees and event staff, but why do you have to define them?
If you just use the word attendees, people may think it's just people coming to enjoy the facility as opposed to people who are working there.
No, this sentence says including attendees and event staff. I agree with you, Tom, that you need to someplace say the staff counts in this
Exactly.
number.
So I think by actually having the term in there, it makes that easier. Because you clearly define that there's people here that are working and there's people here that are attending. And then where we are, really the only place we combined the two is we said we're not having any more than 200 people, the maximum people per size of the event.
Are there any
'Cause
rules
I think
that,
it could get, if all we had was people, we'd have to define what that means and that it does include the event staff.
right, and is there any place where there's something different, some rule for event staff that's different from the attendance?
Well, it's
It's just the parking is one where we. said-
parking, plumbing, and the overall
What,
attendance.
shouldn't that include all the people that are there, the parking and the plumbing?
One would think.
Yeah, we can certainly change our parking to simply say 1 space per every 2 people on site and clarify that that means
Sure.
both attendees and event staff. And we do, I mean, we're clear also that all parking has to be, like, no parking can be on street, so I think that, that would cover us pretty easily.
Is there any benefit to a footnote explaining what we're trying to describe as attendees or
Not in an
people?
ordinance.
There's not a lot of footnotes in the
Okay.
ordinance, I think.
Yeah. We should
I'm
define it.
trying to pull up any notable ones in my
Why
mind. I
not
can't think
just
of any. I don't
leave
think we
the
really do
definitions in there?
footnotes.
Why not just leave the definitions in?
We can, but we just need to go through them
We have to.
and make
define-
sure they
And
work
I'll double
everywhere,
check. So I
which
just
they don't.
changed participants, so we can keep that,
Okay.
We're gonna use, yeah. We're not gonna have a definition of participant, they're attendees.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are we under, if we're going to look at this on, we're under social gathering event, is that where we are, a commercial event, where the attendees are not expected to contribute? Does that meet all the other, is that a universal term there?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. And
Well,
then,
we could use people there, is that what you're saying?
I'm wondering, is it people or is it attendees slash, another term? I'm just trying to
Yeah, every time we use it, we have to make sure it fits.
it fits consistently throughout the document, so.
I think attendees is fine there because the focus is on the guests, not the staff. So I think attendees works there if we have a definition for attendees.
So social gathering event is okay. And then the agricultural education immersion section with attendee and event staff, were there changes there on those?
Well, attending and event staff don't have anything to do with agricultural. It's not under that. It's not a subset.
Okay.
Those
right,
two are not a
just- right,
subset.
Individual
of-
definitions.
Do we need to
It's-
define them if we're not gonna use them?
I think it's helpful to define them. I mean, it's just an argument that someone might make down the road, so to keep it clear.
Yeah, I could see that there would be someone that would say, well, I thought when you said people, you meant attendees. I didn't think you meant the 30 people ahead and staff.
Right,
Right,
Yeah.
and then you get into that whole argument. That's kind of why I'd like to have the clear definition.
yeah.
Do definitions go alphabetically or importance? Like we have agriculture and social event first.
They would go alphabetically in the actual ordinance. So I think I'll need to check in with Galen about how we'd want to structure this. Either social gathering event through event staff would go like under agritourism, or they would all be individual definitions. I think that they would be individual definitions, but if they are all under agritourism, then they would obviously we'd still alphabetize them, but I don't know how social gathering event ended up where it did. That was just an error on my part.
Yeah, I think you would just do them alphabetical. I don't see a need for them to be underneath.
But
Well,
in
except that,
general,
like-
in our ordinance,
Yeah.
definitions go by, they're alphabetized.
That's true.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, attendee would be nice to know what an attendee is before it's used.
Mhm.
So it would be nice to have it before social gathering events.
So we're good with the definition for event staff. We can take out the last sentence, but otherwise happy with it.
So we're removing the last sentence of event staff?
Yeah, I agree that it's not really
Okay,
necessary.
so event staff shall not be counted as attendees for the purpose of this section is deleted.
I feel happy with that. I think I've
Is that what everyone's?
heard that that's not required, but we'll leave event staff with a definition and leave it in the language in the rest of the ordinance.
Okay.
Right. Same with the mass gathering, right? I mean, it's 250,
All right.
includes everybody.
Next comment I have from Paul about
Mass gatherings
the,
over 250. We said
um,
200. So we changed that.
I changed that. That was just a typo again. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't respond to this comment, Paul, because I wasn't sure what.
Which comment? You'll have to be specific.
Oh, sorry. I see some zones allow agriculture and animal husbandry, but some zones only allow agriculture. Is it clear that these differences are recognized, stated subject to new performance standards? Are you talking about the differences between agricultural and animal husbandry just in our ordinance?
The ordinances themselves, some allow agriculture, some allow animal husbandry, some allow animal husbandry subject to ZBA approval, so it's not uniform.
Well,
Looking at this grid.
Mm-hmm.
so we permit, my understanding is agriculture, however it's defined, because you're right, not sure that I've seen a definition of agriculture. I've seen the definition that pertains more to agritourism than just simple agriculture, which I believe is permitted everywhere in town.
It is on some level. In some zones, you have to go to some kind of review to be allowed to do that, but it is on some level permitted everywhere. In many zones, it is a permitted use, which means that they don't have to go to planning board to get approval. But in some zones, it does require planning board approval.
Well, the four you show here, it's a permitted use. Agriculture, which is defined in the ordinance, is a permitted use.
Yes.
Animal husbandry is not a permitted use in all of those zones.
The only place it's not allowed as a permitted use is in the village residential.
And Goose Rocks?
Goose Rocks
Oh, is that it?
not listed.
So the farm and forest zone permits animal husbandry and a farm stand and agriculture and distinguishes between those. So there must be a definition.
Yes, we do have a definition for agriculture and for animal husbandry.
My basic question, we don't cross-reference 240, 4.3. And I think it could be interpreted that we are giving rights that aren't in 4.3. We say earlier you have to follow the performance standards set out in 716, where's the cross-reference? But we don't reference this section. So I don't want to be, people are subject to this other set of rules in terms of animal husbandry, for example.
So I don't think that we would necessarily run into that. If someone's been approved for animal husbandry by the ZBA, we're not going to then make them also go to the ZBA for agritourism, because it's an accessory use. So they can go to the planning board for agritourism regardless of what the permitting process looked like for their primary use on their property. Is that answering the question? I think.
So let's say I don't have anything going on except a lot of fields, and I decide to do animal husbandry and get a few llamas, and then I'm going to run a wedding hall. I would go to, and I'm in one of these zones, I'm in the village residential.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite the school, we're going to do this. So I would go to the ZBA and get my animal husbandry permission. And then if I had that, I would go to the does going to site plan review, does that mean planning board?
Yes. So you would get so if you wanted to raise your llamas for some commercial purpose, presumably selling wool, this is the only thing I can think of doing with a llama. You would have to, yes, you'd go to the ZBA and get approval that way. I'll be honest, we have not had a single ZBA meeting since I've been in this position, so I don't really know a lot about that process, but you get your approval, and then presumably you'd have to wait 2 years to prove that you were generating income through your llamas in order to be able to get that planning board site plan approval. Because if you get your llamas, you're participating in animal husbandry, and then you can't prove to the planning board that you meet this farm definition where you've generated your $2,000 of annual
Why do you say
income.
2 years?
Because I believe that you have to show that you've done that over the course of 2 years. I don't think you can just do it for 1 year.
Under the state?
I think it's it's 1 out of the last 2 years or 3 out of the last 5 years. Or something like that. But I don't believe it's just every year. I don't believe you can do it after 1 year. Let me pull up that definition though.
It makes sense because something like animal husbandry is going to be a use that will impact your neighbors more than perhaps
Potentially, sure.
growing corn. So it requires greater oversight. So it would make sense that we get a site plan review. And then it qualifies for something else that is incorporated within it, which would be agriculture
So
and agritourism.
So I'm looking at the farmland definition. It says the parcel must contribute at least $2,000 gross income from farming activities each year. I'm not sure where I'm remembering reading that about the 1 out of the last 2 or 3 out of the last 5. Maybe it's one of the other tax exemptions that I'm remembering. But this may be helpful for our conversation earlier. The parcel may include land that is not farmable and forested land, but any firewood and timber cut from the forested land may not be counted toward the farm income requirement. So
Right,
answers a question from 20 minutes ago. So
because they wouldn't have people try to get around having the management plan.
sure.
And just selling firewood, and the state says no, you have to manage your forest.
So regardless, so they have to have the llama for a year in order to prove that they've made enough income to qualify as a farm. So I don't think it would be as simple as, I bought this 30-acre piece, let me go buy my llamas, and then tomorrow I'll start hosting birthday parties. It would be a little bit more of a process. So if someone's willing to commit to, animal husbandry through llama for a year in order to host events, I think that's, we don't really have a way to get around that.
Let me ask you this question, because this is my own ignorance on the zoning board of appeals. How do you get that, if I wanted to do animal husbandry, I just go to the ZBA, or do I have to also go to the planning board?
Just the ZBA, I think. They're 2 different things, but the ZBA generally is a higher level of authority. They review different things, so it's not exactly
Well,
correlated, but I don't believe you also have to go to planning board.
Do they have to submit a site review and all the rest?
Yes, so they go through they still go through a review with the ZBA. So they submit an application, staff reviews it, the ZBA reviews it, and so forth.
So they get that principal use, and then if they want to do agritourism, then they're going to have to go to the planning board
Yes.
again and get another.
And they would have to show the planning board, we went through the
I think
ZBA process for animal husbandry, and were approved.
Thank you.
So Paul, does that clear
Yep.
up your
Yeah, I think
concerns?
Thank you.
Okay.
it's going to be reviewed and people will know. That's the important part.
All right, and then we had a question about parking. The 1 space per every 2 event attendees. I think we talked about this earlier. I'll just add for every 2 people on site, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, and why not put comma, including your service staff, since you defined that term? Event staff.
Great. All right, and then there was a comment from both Ann and Paul about the 250 versus 200, so I fixed that.
We're at 200, right?
Yes. All right, and then the sanitary facilities.
Excuse me. Since
Yes.
you're on performance standards, can I make a couple comments?
Sure.
two apologies, first of all. I missed the last meeting, I was on vacation. I had a lousy time, by the way, it was raining the whole time. Anyhow, also, the comments I want to make a little bit on this, a little bit difficult to explain on the computer, so I want to do it in person. I found three inconsistencies with the performance standards. Let me just mention those. So you have 3 slices. The last time that I was here, a month ago, I couldn't really come up with a good analogy as to what my concern was. You recall, I raised this issue before. And think of this, movie theaters and concert halls, venues like that, have standards for how many fire exits they must have. So the more people you have, the more fire exits you need to get people out safely, obvious, okay? And I assume there's some sort of a formula for how you do that. But as you increase the number of people, you increase the number of exits. You double the people, you may not necessarily double the exits. Okay, I'm just speculating on that. So what I found when I looked at this is, you see the three segments we have. So fewer than 50 people, you need 5 acres. That comes down to basically 1 acre can accommodate 10 people. That's what they're saying. Okay. The next slice and the third slice are exactly the same thing. So if you have fewer than 100 people, you need 15 acres. Okay, more people, more acreage, that makes some sense. So basically, rather than having 10 people per acre, now you have 6 2/3 people per acre. Go to the next slice, fewer than 200, 30 acres, it's 1 acre for 6 2/3 people. So the second and third slices are meaningless. Why not just say, if you're gonna have 2 slices, just say fewer than 50, fewer than 200, period. You don't need the second one at all, because it says exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Follow? Now, next comment, I think the trend is wrong.
What,
I'm sorry?
I said, why don't we just discuss that while
Okay.
before we forget
Okay.
and go on to something else?
So you're saying we should make the acreage requirement larger for 200 people?
No, what I'm saying is, the second and third slice say exactly the same thing. You need 1 acre. 1 acre can accommodate 6 2/3 people. The second thing
on
says
a
the same
per
thing.
acre.
Per acre.
Yeah.
Per acre.
So you're saying instead of having the contiguous acre required, you should have just a per acreage?
No, what I'm saying is, second and third slice say exactly the same thing. So in my opinion, the second slice is meaningless. If you're gonna leave it like that, and I disagree with that, but if you leave it like that, you don't need to say less than or equal to 200, just say less than or equal to 300, because it's exactly the same thing.
I mean, what this is really saying that is, if you have 6 acres, you can have 100 people. Or 50.
Yeah, so if we take away the middle slice,
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot between, I mean, either you have to have,
Yeah. But let me go to the other issue, getting back to my fire exits in the theater analogy here. I don't really know what the code would be. To me, it stands to reason. If you have a big plot of land and you're worried about the density of people, use that term, how many people per acre, which is what this is all about. Why are you concerned about that? Well, lightning strike, a fire could happen, et cetera, et cetera. So in my opinion, the more acreage you have, the higher density you can have, because all of a sudden there's a fire, people move away from the fire. It isn't quite like in a building, where you're trapped in a building. You can actually go away from the fire and get away from that. So my opinion would be, as a person who doesn't know beans about this, how you assign this, is that if you happen to have a situation outdoors, like these are, you don't have to be as concerned about the density of the people. You can have more people as you increase the number. So density can increase as the acreage increases because they're outside and can very easily move away from the threat.
Yeah, I think it was more than just, danger and safety. It was
Noise.
impact on neighbors and noise and cars
Yeah,
and
noise and
all of
parking.
that. So, visual impact as well as, neighbor impact.
But you do bring up a good point for a permanent structure. Right, you have an open tent, that's going to be less of a concern because people can scatter for an emergency situation. They scatter through any open, right, it's all open. But if someone is doing something like this in their barn, there probably needs to be a limit based on the size of the barn and the number of egresses, right? That the chief ought to have an opportunity to look at and say it's good, and somehow that should be part of the plan review.
Sure, I think that seems reasonable. I mean, we have similar provisions in site plan and subdivision review, to that the fire chief needs to approve certain
restaurants and-
things, so.
But do we need
But don't we
to,
need to put it
do
in?
we need to put something in here that's subject, that needs to be that review? If
I
it's
think we could add something that says,
as part of that site review, it needs to be considered.
yeah, but like if the events are planned to, happen in an indoor space, that needs to be approved by the fire chief, and have, a specific occupancy limit, maybe depending on that indoor space. So I can certainly talk, I'll take a look at what our other, what our site plan and subdivision say and come up with something consistent, or other reviews.
So with the people who are having an event, 50, 100, 200, would they each of those events require a permit maybe from the fire department, having reviewed the area and making sure it was safe?
I think ideally we would get that out of the way during the site plan review process. So if they're approved for 150 attendees, then we would assume that the planning board was also approving the space that they had for those attendees. Because, the fire chief could come in the day before the event to make sure that the building is appropriate, and then, I don't know, they could put open flames on the ground and cause a fire anyway. So I think that we would hope to cover that in site plan review and just have a blanket across the board. And just have a blanket standard,
Okay.
would be my hope. I also, I don't want to sign the fire chief up for anything that he's not here to agree to.
Okay.
But if I look at this, I don't know if I got the right copy still, it's just an older draft, but if we look at this event attendees per contiguous acres, the way I was reading that is you had to have a minimum of 5 acres, right? But you had to have less than 50 or less people, right? And from any acreage between 5 and 15, you could have up to 100. So if I had 6 acres, I could have 100 guests. If I have 12 acres, I could still only have 100 total attendees.
Right.
And if I was up to 30, I could have 200. So 16 acres to, or 15.1 acres to 30 acres, I could have 200. So it does sort of leave out, what happens if I have 31 acres? So it's really anything larger than 15, you can have 200 people. That's really what it is, right? If you got 32 acres, 40 acres, 100 acres, you still can't only have 200 people max.
Well, you need to have a minimum of 30 acres to have anything over
Okay, so
than
we
100.
probably should
We should.
write this in a way that's
So
explains that.
is that in the title, would that be minimum acres, minimum contiguous
So,
acres?
so I don't really know how to necessarily write it differently.
Yeah.
So for greater,
greater than
for
100?
fewer than or equal to 50 attendees, you need at least 5 acres. For fewer than or equal to 100 attendees, you need at least 15 acres. And for fewer than or equal to 200, so between 100 and 200, you need 30 acres. So I'm not sure how to write that in a different.
5 to less than 15 acres is the 50.
Yes,
15 to less than 30 acres
is 100.
Mm-hmm.
Could
And
we
then
say
30
greater
plus.
than,
And then greater than 30 or greater, it's.
no, but could you say,
Yeah.
for the third bucket, could you say greater than 100 is 30 acres?
I guess we say
saying
100,
less than-
100 to 200 or 101.
No, because
100
200 is the
would-
ma-
But
200
but
is
you
the
could
max.
have, but you could have a 30-person event on a 30-acre parcel, so I don't think having, sure,
But
we could
that's,
certainly do that.
that's self-explanatory. As long as you have 5, you can have 30 people, even
Yes,
if you have 30 acres.
Well, you just put maximum attendees. Maximum people, it's 50 for acres 5 to less than 15,
Okay,
right? And then maximum attendees for the next level is 100 for acres 15 to less than 30 acres.
Mhm.
And then 30 acres and greater, you can have 200, max. Right? If you decide you only want to have 5 people show up on your 30-acre farm, that's your choice, but you can have up to 200.
So are you,
I'm picturing that table in my mind, and it sounds exactly the same, but flipped, so that acres are on the left and attendees are on,
I think, it doesn't.
Doesn't
I think
matter.
you just need to put the,
so if I have 125
It's the
people,
range as opposed to the greater than or less.
Yeah, let me just show.
sure?
we show
Yep.
the-
Mathematically, you can write this
It'll
so
just
it
look
makes
like that.
sense.
Oops.
But the problem, one of the problems I just thought now is that if you have a 5-acre property, what we're saying is you can have up to 50 people.
Right,
But you put 51 on, you must have now 15 acres.
exactly,
So you're telling a person, you have one more person, you better have 10 more acres.
exactly.
Is that gonna be acceptable, I guess?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. I mean, we're just setting a limit,
Hmm.
right? So we feel 5 acres is sufficient for 50, as is 9,
Hmm.
right? And if you get to 15 acres, you can have a bigger number of people. That's probably more has to do with having the availability for parking.
Hmm.
So can you use the word?
and if you have
up to?
101 persons, you need 30 acres, or 125 people, or
Exactly, yeah. So
100,
what you had,
So
you know,
if you-
one more person, you have to have a whole lot more acres just to
right,
accommodate that
you
one
double
person.
your acres.
So you have to have 5 acres, you can have less than or equal to 50 people. If you have 15 acres, you can have up
Maximum.
to 100 people. Use the words up to instead.
Your maximum
The-
number of,
The alternative is where Tom kind of was going, you didn't say it, but you sparked, that instead of trying to have this perfect table, that you just have a number of people per acre, so that there's, you know, there aren't these firm thresholds, just have number of people per acre with a maximum of 200.
so you go to site plan approval and you show you've got 7.5 acres, so the site plan approval would say you can have X number of people, the maximum.
Whatever it is, 75 for
Right.
7.5 acres, or,
Well, that would allow, well, up to a maximum number of people.
yeah, you still
I mean,
have.
it's more
you
more
have
rational.
Minimum, you can have minimum acreage, so minimum acreage and their maximum people. So you need a minimum of 5 acres, maximum of 200 people can attend anything, and it's on a number of people per acre basis. So you don't have all these weird, because those thresholds,
Right, or
the 51 people, you need 10 more acres, doesn't feel rational.
One of my concerns is someone coming for the site plan review and saying, I have 5 contiguous acres, and I'm only inviting 5 more than 50 people, so can you give me an exemption? Can we go to 55 people on this? I'm just wondering, if the more specific we have it, the more that the site plan review would have to follow the guidelines.
And I think that'd be accounted for with what I just described.
Yeah.
I'm fine either way. I think either way it works. We just set a number, right? The idea is that we just don't want 200 people on a 5-acre.
Right.
Right, and causing issues.
Right.
In an area where there's probably more neighbors
Right.
versus if you have a 30-acre piece of land, you can handle that, so.
So what would that number be per acre?
To use the,
Who's the math?
to use the 6 and 2/3.
Well, if you go by
or
the
whatever, or
50 and the
10.
5, that's 10 people per acre.
an extra 6 2/3 and 6 2/3.
But that sounds weird if you have 2/3 of a person.
Well, just the math, just the math.
Yeah, but we're
Was
not
it
gonna
an
put,
attendee or is it an
we're not
event
gonna put
staff?
2/3 in our ordinance.
Maybe children, you know.
So you have to round down.
Yeah, you have to round down.
Then you gotta explain that. You gotta round down. Or round up.
Well, you just,
Everybody
we're just making up a number that we feel comfortable with. So whether we round up or round down, doesn't matter.
Well, I think the suggestion of making it people per acre is much easier to manage.
People per acre.
People per
People per
acre.
Mhm.
People per acre.
It's more logical.
Yeah.
It's more rational.
I don't have a basis.
How's 8? 8 right between.
Well, we
6 and
started with 50 attendees and 5 acres, so
That's
that's
10.
10.
10.
Which to your earlier point, when you're up to 30 acres, you can probably have more density anyway. So if you're stuck with 10 per acre,
10 per acre.
Yeah, but we're gonna, we,
Up
no,
to
no fewer
a
than 5
maximum of
acres,
200 people.
maximum 200 people, 10 people per acre.
Yeah,
Sure.
Keeps it simple.
try it.
So I have a question.
So that's 5 parking spots per attendee. Per acre.
Oh,
If you do 10 people, you have a 2.
Yeah, but
that's
the
5
two-
per acre.
Parking spot for every 2 people still applies, no matter.
right, because it
Which-
wouldn't, if you only have 30 people there, you don't need,
Right.
and you've got, 5 acres, you don't need to have.
I got
Enough
4
parking.
cars in my driveway, and it's fine, less than.
May I ask a question? So many of these old parcels have a road running through them, so that you'll have the barn on one side, and then you'll have the main residence on the other.
Mhm.
And so we're saying contiguous acres.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, if you have some come before you and say, well, look, we've got, 30 acres, but 15 is on one side and 15 is on the other side. What can we do with that? Can we still have 200 attendees?
I think it would depend on if the two halves are separated by a right-of-way, or if there's just a like a dirt little travel road running between. If we have them listed on our GIS map as 2 separate lots, those are not contiguous.
Right,
It'd be more of the lot line.
And that's what the
versus
state-
driveway, right?
the
Mhm.
state definition is also contiguous,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because they don't want you to come and say, I have
Mhm.
2 acres over here and an acre over here, and my mother has an acre, and so therefore I have a farm.
I think someone could make an argument if they have 2 separate lots that are literally right next to each other, like share a boundary line, but if there's an actual road separating them, I would not say that those are contiguous.
Right. I mean, if they abut, they're still contiguous, even though there's a lot line.
Yeah, I
Sure,
guess,
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So someone, you could make an argument for that, but if there's a whole road separating
Right,
them, or, or another lot or something.
okay. Okay, so our farm did have a road running through it.
right, and somebody might have had access,
We had 45 acres on one side and another 40 acres on the other side.
right,
And a barn on one side and a house on the
right,
other.
which is,
So it was how they built them. So I'm just wondering if I came,
but if you owned the whole farm, was the road yours and people accessed your?
it was a road,
Oh,
people
it
would
was a
use
public
it to
road.
drive through, but it was a dirt road and it wasn't often traveled. But I'm just wondering if you had someone come before you. It's always good to anticipate the question before it arrives.
Yeah.
I think,
Have the answer.
yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it is, we every so often this comes up where we notice a parcel is split into 2 halves while technically being one lot. But I think we only have maybe 2 or 3 of them in town. So I don't think that, and we would not allow one to be created now. So I don't think that it would be, in Kennebunkport, I don't think it would be a big challenge
Okay,
specifically.
okay.
So we're gonna,
Thank you.
just to kind of clarify then, we're gonna scratch the table and then put in specs, a minimum 5 acre
For-
lot.
People per acre instead.
Yeah,
With the
10
max.
10 people per acre.
Sure.
And maximum 200 people,
Regardless of the size.
yeah, regardless.
and a minimum of 5 acres?
Minimum
Yes.
5 acres. Right?
Yep.
Really nice. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the ad.
Everybody, my mind lost it a while ago.
We're back.
He said 8 people per acre,
10.
10 people
10 people.
per acre. Okay. All right. Tom, did you have any more?
Nope.
Okay. So,
So what was number 2? That was number 1. What was
No,
number 2?
I had 3 issues related to one point. I
Oh,
have 3 issues related to one topic.
Okay, so we're
complete.
good?
we're done.
Excellent, thank you.
okay, so back to, did we finish with plumbing? Or just adequate sanitary facilities?
I was concerned about just one hand washing receptacle for 75 people. It just seemed to be too few.
So this is the standards from the Uniform Plumbing Code.
Yeah, we're not gonna change that.
I
Okay.
I guess, I mean, we can probably make them stricter, but This is, I just picked the use that was most closely related, but I mean, if people are uncomfortable with this, I think we can make them
Yeah.
stricter.
I mean, at the end of the day, people are gonna do what they feel is best
Right.
for their customers.
Right.
Okay. Good.
Probably be-
Yeah, if people are getting reviews that say,
Yeah.
there was a 10-person line for the sink, they might change their practices. All right, and then, we talked about adding plumbing requirements to education. Okay, so then, Paul had a concern about the event end time. So I left a comment here, I think that, and about the liquor license. I know that in the past, caterers for, if someone is having a wedding or something, the caterer will get a temporary liquor license, and that's part of their process. So I think that that is already regulated and managed. I don't think that we need to include it here. And if the farm is looking to serve liquor in-house, they would need to get a liquor license for that as well. So I don't think that the liquor license is something that the planning board would manage. I've never seen them talk about liquor licenses. So the state, I think, has liquor licenses pretty locked down. And if someone's selling liquor illegally, that's,
Right.
I mean, it's a bigger issue than violating the planning board site plan. It'll be a state issue
Yeah.
as well. So I don't think that the liquor license, I don't foresee liquor licenses being a problem that we need to manage here. I mean, caterers are attached to their licenses, so they're not looking to violate those laws. And then, in terms of the end time, we based it, BlackRock was given a 10 p.m. end time on their events. It's kind of where we pulled that from, but we can certainly have it wrap up earlier. I'd say that,
I thought we had some kind of consensus, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I misread it, that we were gonna try this out and see how it worked, and we didn't want to go with events till 10 o'clock. And you can run, I did catering in college, you can, a good catering operator will be done the moment the band finishes, like everything.
mhm.
Then they come back the next day and they clean up. They've long cleared, put away the food, etc. It's not like they need 2 hours after. So,
But it may be an event that doesn't even have music, or has like one guy on a non-acoustic guitar.
yeah, of course. So what do we want the end time of the event to be?
Are we
we-
thinking of having an acoustic being a little longer as opposed to?
Well, we have sound
Well,
covered.
we've prohibited anything non-acoustic just across the board, so only acoustic sound, I think.
No, this
right?
says no amplified
No
sound
amplified
after
sound.
7.
After, okay.
7.
Yeah.
So you can have a band during the day
So we've got that.
for an afternoon wedding, which is common,
Mm-hmm.
I think
but
I'm
So-
okay with 10, I think.
So if they're meeting the sound regulations, is finishing later? I don't know. Why would finishing later necessarily be a challenge?
I'm fine with 10.
10's
I'm fine with that.
I'm not comfortable with that, but that's just me.
Because they'll likely schedule it to end by 9:30, and just do the takedown, which shouldn't be a noisy activity. Right, so they can be done with it. Or
Things,
they may just close.
things seem to go late now. I mean, I'm early to bed, so to me, 9 o'clock is fine. But I see that people really enjoy themselves to a much later time. And I think 10 p.m. for an event is fair. If it became a problem, then it's something that can be addressed down the road. That
Yeah, we
time.
still have the noise ordinance and all the rest that's in place.
So while we're using the word event, what's an event? I say that, I have that comment here someplace. Like, I'll give you 2 examples. A lot of wedding halls do 2 weddings a day. They'll have a 1 o'clock wedding and they'll turn it around, clean it up, and they'll have another event in the evening. Is that 2 events?
Yes,
Yes.
that's 2
It's
events.
2 events.
And that takes,
If you have a whole different set of people, I mean, I guess if 2 people with the exact same guests decided to get married,
No, I'm talking
Back to back
I'm talking about
weekends.
2 separate, what all of us would say was a
That's-
different wedding.
That's the 2 out of their 8.
Yeah, that's the other right.
Yeah, and I think that would be, I mean, I think that we would very easily be able to say this is its own separate event. You have different people attending. So they could, I mean, if they're allowed 2 events, we haven't limited the number of events per day. But
Right.
if they want to use up both of their 2 per calendar month events on a 1 PM and a 6 PM wedding, I don't really see that we would necessarily have a problem with that. If they can squeeze all of that into their allotted time.
But
And
the
then-
music at the 6 PM wedding would have to end at 7.
Mhm. So, be a quiet, smaller wedding, but if they can squeeze both of those events into that one day, then they choose not to have any other events for the rest of the month. I don't see that we would have a problem with that.
But the other side of event, which, can you have an event that lasts 3 days? I'm having a workshop on whatever, and I encourage people to come to the area, and they're staying at hotels. I don't have a short-term license, but we have all kinds of music going on for 3 days.
I read that comment. I would say no. That would be very hard to pull off. People aren't allowed to stay on site, so we would,
It's not hard to pull off.
everyone would leave at the end of the day. We could very easily say this is a separate event, even though the same people have come. You've already used your allotted 8 to 10 window. Everybody has left. They've come back. This is now a new event, even if you've advertised it as a 3-day series.
Yeah, but
How would that fit, though?
I just think definitionally, we need to take care of that.
Well,
Is a 3-day, do we care, first of all? I'm having a 3-day yoga retreat, and we're gonna have music and, whatever, and it goes on for 3 days. And we have workshops, and we have,
Have we eliminated the possibility of people staying overnight?
yes, unless, if they
Yes.
don't have a short-term rental license. If they get one, that's fine.
so Paul, are you looking at on the event, on C4, a maximum of 8 events are allowed per calendar year with no more than 2 allowed per calendar month?
Right,
So are you saying that perhaps no more than, that this should be a maximum of 8 daily events are allowed per calendar year with no more than 2 daily events allowed per calendar month?
I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'm telling you what my problem is.
8 events lasting no longer than 1 day.
8,
Daily, I like daily.
Yeah,
Makes
daily.
sense. Yeah, so just add daily.
And that would take care of the 3-day event, maybe.
Rock festival.
Yes,
Woodstock
Woodstock.
Woodstock for high-end people who can afford the $5,000 entry fee to get to see.
Well, that'd be kind of neat.
So we're sticking
We
with 10
change the
PM,
ordinance
we're
right
adding daily. We're good there.
Yeah.
And then I saw another comment from
Daily
Paul
events.
about the sound ordinance, saying that they're not exempt from
Yeah, where's that section?
that ordinance.
That's up above? No.
It's right below, so bullet 3 under section C. My concern has been the exemption.
You say activities associated with this use
Are not exempt.
are not exempt from 246.16, but 6.16 has that broad exemption. So which I brought up last time, which I think you're trying to address, but
So-
I'm not sure the language solves the problem.
I think we could say activities associated with this use are not included in the exemptions listed in 246.16B or whatever it is. I can't remember the letter
That would be better.
that goes with it. Okay. I can certainly change that. This is or not.
Not included in the exemptions.
What's on a side note question, what's the amplified sound in like downtown? Like for Nonantum and Colony and all that? What time is that?
It's across, our decibel limit is across the board, 7 PM.
During the day and at night.
Yeah, 7 to 7 and 7 PM, 7 AM to 7 PM and then 7 PM to 7 AM.
These weddings at night at Stripers, Colony, Nonantum, they
If-
don't
Eh,
stop at 7.
But if they're conforming to the decibel limits. I think that I'm not that familiar with what
I
they're.
have no idea what decibel limits even mean.
So if we got a
It's
Everybody-
electrified, because you could.
yeah. So if someone
I can hear it.
I can hear
But
it.
it's measured
So
at the
what's
property
time?
line.
Yes.
It's not measured on the dance floor. It's measured at the property line.
So if someone-
So you take your iPhone and there's an app. So
Well-
you stand on and the police have the same,
we have
Okay,
a
but then that has to
fancy
end at what
device
time?
with.
7 o'clock. If it exceeds that
If
60.
it doesn't exceed, it has to end at what time?
I don't know if there is an end time, as long as they're not exceeding.
It says
I
7,
think it's 10,
10
Oh,
or
I
11?
believe.
well, on 6/16, it ends at 7 PM.
So the NASM specifically has an agreement with BlackRock, and those events have to end by 10.
No,
But-
I'm not talking about this
You
at all.
can
I just was
general
asking a
noise
side,
ordinance.
general question, like noise downtown
I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that.
out of those hotels.
Okay, this is, well, this is.
Their noise
10 o'clock,
would be the
11
same.
o'clock.
It's still 7 p.m. as long as as long as they're not exceeding that decibel limit. So if they could, I guess, keep making noise after 7 p.m. as long as it's not
The noise is
exceeding.
Well, I hear it from my house off of School Street.
That I
so I'm
would
just
call in a
curious what
complaint
the-
if,
No, I
if
don't
that's the
care.
case.
I don't care. People are having fun.
I mean, we're not like out there every,
Right,
you know,
if someone complains, then they have to
yeah,
go.
so if we get a complaint, the police department will go down, they'll stand at the property line with their little decibel meter. You know, we have a real one, it's not an app, it's got little fancy microphones, and they'll measure the
But there's
decibels.
no end
and-
time. I'm just so curious. 10, 11?
I
What
don't think
time,
so.
what
But
time do
that-
bars have to close? I mean,
It
there's
says
a,
7 to 7 for a certain decibel.
For
I don't think that-
6/16, it ends at 7 PM.
No,
I don't think that
No.
we regulate the actual end time of the event,
Huh.
as long as they're meeting the other requirements
So
that
they
need
could
to
play
meet.
music till 2 in the morning.
As far as I know,
Quietly.
as long as they're not
As long as they
exceeding the
don't exceed
decibel limit.
That threshold, which they might. I mean,
Wow.
of course, they can hear the ocean too, so it's exceeding the threshold.
Yeah.
But you can't regulate that.
So wait a
I
second,
actually
so,
enjoy it.
so this is sound pressure level limits measured in decibels, 7 AM to 7 PM. But it's like 72 decibels, I guess. But if you have less than, the limit is 70 decibels, but outside of those hours, is it limited
So if you're, well,
You have to
if
be
stay below
quiet.
that, you're okay.
for at any point?
right. And we don't seem to have you have to have lights out by 1 AM or something like that.
Between 7 AM and 7 PM, we have a decibel limit. It's higher than the decibel limit between 7 PM and 7 AM. So there is a limit, no matter what time of day it is.
Mr. AI says
Drops,
most
yeah.
bars in Kennebunkport close at
As long as
10:30.
you're not exceeding
I don't think we have a particular issue with consistent late crowd.
No.
I actually am never here past 7 on
Right.
or 8 on a meeting night, but
No,
usually 5.
sidewalks roll
So.
up.
Okay.
This is not a conflict.
Yeah, we don't need to, I think that's fine.
So that's all. I think all of the comments. Ann, did you have another one, or is
It was, my concern was the,
I saw there was
Title.
like an editorial
yeah.
comment. But
Well, I just thought that the social gathering event I thought might benefit from being clarified a little bit by saying social gathering event on property designated as a farm by the state of Maine. I'm just trying to come up with something that really specified where that social gathering event occurred. Otherwise, it could be anywhere. For
Okay.
finding that, if you were looking for it in the document. And I'm sure you guys could come up with something better language than that. It would depend on what we all end up with at the end of the day.
okay, so you're suggesting just clarifying.
Yeah, where that social gathering event is.
Okay, I'll add comments.
And the same would be true for educational. There's no place, location.
You know, if we're talking about agritourism, we're really talking about qualified farmland.
All right,
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
So that is the end of the comments. So
Wait a minute. Didn't we back
Do we
to,
miss
so
one?
what were we gonna do about plumbing for,
I'll just add it in as well to the education section. I can do that right now. I'll copy and paste.
and shouldn't we just mirror and on parking, we're like using different language. Parking for attendees must be contained on site.
So this,
Like, that,
so I'm saying like no shuttling in this case.
why not?
I guess it doesn't really.
I thought if we have school groups and the school bus drops, but there's no place for them to really put the school bus, that would be fine, who cares?
Presumably, if they can hold 50 or 25 cars, they should have a place for a school bus, right?
Not if the field's wet.
I guess that's true.
You do anything this time, my wife's farm, you still can't drive anything heavy on it. It's still soaked.
It's still it's gotta be parked on site, so.
Right, but
I think we could take that parking out entirely if we want to. I mean, we've lumped it into regular off-street parking and loading, non-residential for the entire use. So that would encompass social gatherings and education/immersion. So I think that we could just take out that parking for attendees must be contained on site. I think we could.
But
I don't know.
247.16B, that only relates to social gathering events. You're heading for B. You could make that generic, but that wouldn't,
But Article 6 has one space per every 2 people on site, including event staff. For this use, the spaces may consist of grassy or otherwise pervious areas. So
right, but then you have
It's
the
the entirety
caveat
of
that if you don't have it,
agritourism.
you can bring them in from off-site, and that's fine. I don't see any reason why we would be so restrictive for an educational group. I would want the same,
sure, just copy and paste that in too.
So that new section, where do you see that? You can't link to that right now. 240-716.
you mean way up at the top, that cross-reference?
Yeah.
This one?
It's not a hyperlink. Is
It's
that what
under
you?
definitions under agritourism. Right there.
Which this one? Yes, it's not hyperlinked because
It's not,
it doesn't technically exist.
right, it's not live, it's just,
And I can add a hyperlink in for animal husbandry. It's just an oversight. All right, so we're good. We're wrapped up with comments. I will add in the section about. I'll change to be acreage dependent on participants instead of broader categories, and I don't know, I'll review any other comments I made if there's changes that need to be added. But I think that was the
Great.
big one
Good.
that we didn't change right now. And then I'll email it out. We can, I think, next, I ideally would not like to discuss it again at the next meeting, but we can simply take a vote on it and call it a day.
I know this is your first rodeo, but it's not my first rodeo, and mistakes are often made in haste. So I would
Yes.
caution you,
Certainly.
since this is your first rodeo, that it's better that we get it right, even, even if we have a town deadline, or your boss is breathing down your neck.
I agree, and I
Or-
certainly, so I'd be happy to if there's outstanding things, I'd be happy to revisit agritourism. And this is kind of the next up on our agenda is to discuss this, but we have the November election is coming up rapidly, surprisingly enough. Our deadline to give Tracy and Lori, just a general idea of what we'd like to put on the ballot is June 20th. So, in the next, so Galen and I are working on pulling together again the omnibus land use changes that we were working on several months ago, that we sort of put to the side and just focused on a couple of key elements of. So we'll put those back together without the elements that hopefully will be approved in June and bring those back to all of you. So, well, I agree. I'd rather have the ordinances put together correctly and so forth. We do have other things we need to focus on as well over the next couple of months. So, if we can get the okay from you guys for agritourism, obviously it will go through attorney review as well for any snags that are left.
So that would be one for November, and then hopefully we can do something on the land use ordinance or you just mentioned, or the stormwater, right?
Yes. So stormwater and the omnibus land use changes are what we're hoping to discuss over the next couple of months.
And farmer's market.
Yes, and farmer's
And
market.
farmer's market.
And farmer's market.
Thank you.
And farmer's market.
Yes, we can,
And I think we're going to include farmer's market.
yes, yes, certainly.
Seems to be
We would not forget
oversighted.
about the farmer's markets.
Okay,
And food trucks, I believe. Heard mentioned a few times as well.
we can do them together.
That'd be so great.
So we'll try to get those out to you sooner rather than later, ideally, this week or early next week, so that our next meeting on the 17th, we're able to talk about them and get them, we're not, you guys are not voting on them as to approve them to be sent
Right.
to the voters, but as topics to send to Tracy and Lori that we'd like to get onto the ballot. So no official language yet, just an idea for a proposal. So we'll get that to you soon so that everyone can review and we can discuss it at the next meeting.
Which is the 17th.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you just covered 3 and 4, right?
Yes.
All right, so 5 or 4.5 is other. So
Mhm.
we added, what did we add? What was that?
I forget. Rob, what was it, something you brought up?
Farm stands. Then the first meeting in July, we need to do the vote for the officers.
Reorganization.
All that stuff, right? We should have a short discussion about the strategies,
Mm-hmm.
right? 'Cause we want to make sure that we look at the 6 that we assigned to ourselves out of those 230, so we were very judicious in not overloading ourselves, but the whole idea was to support others and help them get through.
Right.
And it's not clear to me how we're tracking that, the other work, right? Because that was the one thing that we learned from the 2012 when we had all these strategies. We just kind of threw them out there and hoped and prayed that they would get done. Right?
Mhm.
And that didn't work very well. So then we said, we got to at least get buy-in from everybody that we're assigning these things to. And we did achieve that. Right? So everybody did agree that those were things that their committees and boards should be working and tracking and so forth. So we need to have some mechanism. I would like at least once a year an update, to be honest. Even if it's, we didn't get to work on those, we're attacking these 2, great. So we need to have some discussion about how we.
Some mechanism.
Yeah, I think if we can make that work, that would be good. One of the things that we've had trouble with as staff is, we try to get updates from committees about how they're doing on the comp plan. They don't all meet very consistently, so it sometimes can be hard to pin them down for an exact update. But we do try to track that as best as we can.
So maybe we can get guidance from you and Galen is whether or not there should be, a request from our committee, that I send out as a chair to everyone else that's on there, including the Board of Selectmen, because they have assigned actions, right?
Yeah,
asking for an update.
with their section of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, and we can include that, or if it's something that should come from his department, or is it something that should, or enough comes from the town manager, I don't know. And I'm happy
Okay.
to do it one of those 3 ways, but I think we have to be very proactive and push for that information.
I
Yeah,
agree.
certainly.
It was when I met with you and Galen, Nadia, it was one of the things that impressed me. Instead of, we do all this work on a comp plan, it sits on the shelf for 10 years. But every year, we're really tracking to make
Exactly.
progress. And I think we should make sure it happens.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So that's, I wanna talk about that too. I don't wanna get lost in talking about the changes to the ordinance in November, and lose out on that, because I think it's important.
Yeah, so I think that next meeting, so the 17th, I think will be mostly ordinance related.
Yep.
And then I think that the first meeting in July, we can certainly really dig into the strategies and kind of what our plan is with working with other committees.
So July 1 is actually first
A Tuesday, is
Yeah,
it?
is that,
Yeah, July
it's gonna be
1.
right around people,
July
I'm sure, doing
15th.
vacations and all that.
I won't be here.
You won't be here?
I do remember last year, I think we bumped it out to the second week of July just because of the 4th being a heavy travel
Okay.
time.
That would be the 8th?
The 10th.
The
Oh,
8th.
sorry,
Tuesday the 8th.
I'm looking at June. Yeah.
Does Tuesday
Yes,
the
the
8th
8th.
work better for everyone? No?
I'm here at either
Not
one.
here, either one? You here?
I could do either.
You can do either? So maybe I would maybe suggest we just stick with the first then,
Okay.
right? Do the first and third, that's consistent with what we do.
Yeah, otherwise we mess up the third week.
Yeah,
Are we
otherwise
gonna
mess
meet
up the
2
third.
weeks in a row? or-
Right.
I don't wanna do that.
Although I'm not here the 15th, but make it work. If you're gonna be here, I can call it.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
One quick comment. A lot of work has gone into prepping for an election, the annual report. Nadia, Galen, Dan, I just want to acknowledge and thank you for all that work.
Oh, nice.
Of course.
Yeah, the committee's done a great job. Hopefully I expressed that well enough.
Yeah.
So thank you all for your efforts. I hadn't seen it that it got published.
Are they out front?
Yeah, okay.
I got it
You
at
guys
Bradbury's.
should
I got it at Bradbury's. I don't know where else to distribute it.
Good man, shop
I
local.
honestly, I don't know if they're out front. I don't usually walk through that hallway. It's online. That's where I always get it.
Yeah, they're always,
I'm old school.
they're always, I mean, are there any out here? Sometimes they're here.
Oh,
Much
I'm
easier to look
not
at
sure.
what Dan pays in real estate taxes this way.
Right.
All right.
All right, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Get handed back.
This I don't remember who this came down from.
Dan.
Somewhere
Oh, yeah,
over
he
there.
moved- I'll
Dan.
second. I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Be sure to send us a question.
More than you guys
Who,
have
I'm supposed to add that to the minutes.
One of the things
Who
that I'm gonna
just